everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tor Tries. So this is my second episode in the series, and today I'm actually going to be reviewing a crochet book. So the book I'm going to be reviewing is this one here. So it's called The Animal Friends of Pica Pau. And in this video I'm going to be giving you some information about the book and the author. Then I'm going to be showing you what I've made and telling you the things that I liked from the patterns that I've done in the book so far, because I haven't done all of them yet. And I'm also going to be telling you the things I've learnt from doing the patterns in the book, so any new stitches or any new techniques that I quite like and might use in my own patterns. So yeah, that's what this video is going to be about. And I know in my previous video I mentioned that I'm more of a fan of free patterns, and that is still true, but I do make an exception for physical books. There's something about having a physical crochet book that I really like. I don't really tend to buy digital patterns. I can't even remember the last time that I did. I only tend to buy them if there's something that I really want to make, and that's the only option. But I do just like having a book and being able to just flick through, pick a random pattern and just work through it and see what comes out of it. So yeah, that's what this video is going to be about. So the author of the book is called Yan Schenkel, and she's an Argentinian crochet designer. I think she's been designing crochet patterns for over 10 years now, so she's quite experienced in it, and I think that's also her full-time job, so that's pretty cool. And when I was looking up the book online, it seems like you can get it in most standard bookshops online, so I found it on Amazon, eBay, World of Books and Book Depository for around the same price on all of them, and the price that it's at the moment is about £12. I bought mine a year ago and I reckon it was around the same price then as well. The book itself came out in 2017, but yeah, I only actually found out about it last year, which is quite surprising considering that I think this is actually a really popular book in the crochet world. I see a lot of Instagram posts and stuff like that with patterns from the author, so yeah, this is quite a well-known one, I think. In terms of which languages you can get it in, it seems like it comes in loads of different languages as well, which is really cool. So even if you speak German or French or whatever, it seems like you can get the book translated into those languages too. And then yeah, obviously as I mentioned before, the number of patterns is 20, so when you work out the price per pattern, that's actually not bad really for £12. So yeah, pretty good value for money, I would say there. The intended level of crochet experience for anyone using this book, I would say, to be honest, it is aimed at anyone. So even complete beginners, I would say, could use this book because there's so much detail in the first few pages. Like, there's a whole load of pages about how to do basic stitches and just explaining basic crochet concepts. So even if you've never picked up a crochet hook before, you could probably give this book a go. You might need YouTube alongside to help you sort of visually see someone doing a stitch on video, because I find that, looking at a picture only really helps if you understand the basics of crochet. Sometimes you really just need to watch someone doing something and then replicate it in that way. But if you've got YouTube open as well, you can just look up the stitches too, and I'm sure you will be able to get the hang of it. So I think anyone can use this book, and I'm obviously an advanced crocheter and I still really enjoy the patterns in this book, so they're not too simple that they're boring for advanced level crocheters either. So I think yeah, it really is for everyone, this book. And there are a couple of other books I think that Yan has. I saw there's a second iteration of this book that came out just last year actually, so I'd be quite tempted to get my hands on that too. But then I also saw a couple of, maybe one or two other books that she had, but I wasn't sure because they seem to be in a different language, so it could just be that those two books are actually just translated slightly differently in other languages. But yeah, I think maybe there might be a few other patterns of hers floating around, so I'll have to do a bit more research into that. Now I'll show you the two characters that I've made so far from this book. So the first one is Pedro the pig, and I like the names in the book as well. They're all named, these characters. This is Pedro. And they all have a bit of a backstory as well, so it's not just a name, like that. There's a whole story behind each character as well, which I really like too. So yeah, that was Pedro, and then this is Hans the bear. He's quite tall, as you can see. And so on Pedro, I did this last year, so I can't quite remember, but I think I used DK yarn for Pedro, and then for Hans I used Aran because I'm really into that weight of yarn at the moment. That's basically my favourite, and to be honest I like how Hans turned out a lot better, because if you look at Pedro in a bit more detail you can see some holes slightly. It's not too bad, but I just prefer the look of holes being closed up a lot more. So yeah, in the future I'm definitely just going to use Aran weight yarn for all of the patterns, even though I think in the book she uses DK, but it's completely up to you. You can use any weight of yarn really and just tailor your crochet hook to reduce holes pretty much. So yeah, so I plan to make all of the characters in the book eventually. I know I've only made 2 of 20, so I haven't really got that far into it yet, which is kind of crazy considering that I've had this since last year, but you know, I've been working on other patterns and stuff as well. But yeah, no, like I definitely want to make all of the patterns in this book, and I'll definitely make another video or even multiple videos showing you my progress as I work through all of the different characters, to show you what they all look like. So yeah, that's something that I plan to do in the future. And now I'll just talk about a few things that I really like about this book. So the first thing is I really like the colour scheme. So as you can see on the front, you can kind of tell that there's a bit of consistency. Like you can just tell there's a particular colour palette that she's used. I think I would call it maybe earthy tones that she uses, and I really like that. And obviously when you're working through you can just change the colours to whatever you like personally, but I just love the aesthetic of the book. It's just really nice to look at, even if you're not crocheting any of it. Like just admiring what the pictures look like is really nice. So yeah, I like the colours that she chose. And then secondly, I like that there's a consistent style across all of the characters as well. So I've actually seen on Etsy a lot of people selling the finished product of the patterns that they've made from these books. And you know what, like I haven't seen all of the characters, but I can immediately tell when one of them is Yan's pattern, because they all have like some really distinctive features that especially the stripes. Like the stripe is probably the main one, but you can just tell when it's her pattern, and I really like that she sort of developed her own style, and you can tell it apart from other patterns. So that's the second thing that I really like about the book. And then the third thing that I like is that everything's really well explained. As I mentioned previously, if there's a stitch that you haven't heard of before, then she shows you pictures and explains how to do it. So actually there was one stitch in this that I hadn't done before, or that I don't remember doing previously, or just I hadn't seen it written like that before, so I'll explain that in a minute. But it was really useful to see the pictures, and I was able to understand it without looking up a video of how to do it, so that was really great. The pictures are really good quality, so again you can follow through and see the steps as to how she sort of works through to the finished product. And then I like that everything in here is kind of simple but effective. So as I mentioned previously, beginners can do these patterns because they're not particularly difficult really, but that they are effective. Like they don't necessarily look like a very simple pattern. Like some patterns you can just tell that, you know, they weren't that complicated, but these actually kind of look complicated, and there's a few sort of techniques that I feel like Yan uses to achieve that, which I'll speak about in the next section as well. But that's another thing that I really like about the book. So yeah, then I'll move on to things that I learned from doing the couple of patterns that I've done so far. So when I made Pedro, which like I mentioned was last year, I was creating some of my own patterns already by that point, but I wasn't necessarily taking it too seriously, whereas now I do take it a lot more seriously, the patterns that I make, and I try and make them as high quality as possible. But yeah, around that time I wasn't necessarily thinking too much when I was doing a pattern about what I was learning from it. I was more just sort of passively doing the pattern, then forgetting about it, moving on to the next one. Whereas now I'm trying to make an active effort to think at the end of the pattern, think what sort of techniques and stitches did I learn from this that I either didn't know before, or maybe I hadn't used them in that way before, or I hadn't realised a certain way of doing things. And I think that's really useful because you can use those tips in your own patterns, and I'm not suggesting at all that you copy exactly what someone else has done. Obviously that's completely wrong and you shouldn't do that, but it's just like how an author of a standard book reads a variety of other people's books and probably takes ideas from each of those in creating their own writing style, and I think that applies to crochet as well. You do a range of patterns and you take aspects of things that you liked in other people's patterns and you adapt them to make them to the way that you like it, and that's how you create your own style. So I actually think there's a lot of value in doing other people's patterns, and not just because I got into a bit of a habit like around Christmas time where I was feeling a bit guilty for doing other people's patterns and thinking, oh no, I should be coming up with my own one. But actually sometimes to create the best patterns you do need to be doing other people's at the same time, and just taking some new ideas and new approaches from other people. So yeah, I'll speak you through the things that I learned from mainly the hands pattern, because I hadn't really got into the habit of writing down things that I'd learned when I was doing Pedro, as I mentioned before. So the first thing that I learned is actually this rib stitch. this is the stitch I was mentioning before that I just don't remember ever doing this stitch before, or maybe I have but it wasn't called rib stitch, like I can't quite remember. But basically this is just doing a front post single crochet and then a back post and then a front post and then doing that for a few rounds, and it creates the ribbed effect. And now usually in my patterns when I want to create a rib I would just do rows, and then I would do like say chain 6 or something, and then I'll go through just the back loop of every single crochet, and I'll keep doing that for however many rows it takes to sort of go all the way around the circle that I've created for whatever I'm trying to get a ribbed effect for. And actually I've realised that doing this rib stitch is maybe a bit more simple and sometimes more effective. Obviously it creates more of a diagonal rib, whereas when I do the ribbed approach that I was talking about in rows, you get more of a straight line. But it's just useful to know a new technique in case I ever wanted to sort of create that effect in the future for one of my other patterns. The next thing that I learned is a pom-pom makes anything look better. So as you can see, this hat has a little pom-pom on, which I made myself with a pom-pom maker, and you can get those so cheap on eBay. They're just like a little plastic thing that you make pom-poms out of, and they're really easy to use. And like, just looking at that, if you imagine it without the pom-pom, I don't know, like it just looks so much better with it, doesn't it? I feel like a pom-pom can make anything look better and a bit more complex, so yeah, I'll definitely bear that in mind for any future patterns that I make as well. The third thing that I learned is that waistcoats are a really good idea to cover up messy colour changes. So as you can see, this guy's got a little waistcoat here, and if I take it off, you'll be able to see here is where I did the colour changes, and because I knew it was going to be covered up by a waistcoat, I didn't bother with the whole invisible colour change, trying to make it as neat as possible. I just knew it was going to be covered up anyway, so it didn't matter. So that's a really good technique if you can't be bothered to do nice colour changes, just cover it up with a little waistcoat. So yeah, I'll also keep that in mind in the future if I'm feeling a bit lazy. The next thing is that the stripes really make this look a lot more complex than it is, as well, as I mentioned before. So colour changes in general can just really add a layer of complexity onto your patterns, even if the pattern itself is not that complicated. So if you're just doing like a standard sort of round shape in amigurumi style, if you keep changing the colour, it just, I don't know, it just looks more complicated than it actually is, and it really is quite effective. So yeah, I like that, and that's actually something that I've done in my own patterns too. So on my Etsy shop, you'll notice I've got a little Eric Animal Crossing crochet pattern, and you can see that there's quite a lot of colour changes in the jumper, and I think that makes it look quite a lot more complicated than it actually is. So yeah, that's quite an interesting technique. And then thirdly, sorry, not thirdly, I mean lastly, I think I'm on the fifth one now actually. This technique here, using a bobble stitch to create a thumb, is really good because it's so easy. You just do it in the round, so you're not going back and sewing something on afterwards, because sometimes what I'll do is I'll like create a separate thumb and then sew it onto the hand at the end of the pattern. But actually this way is a lot more easier because, yeah, like you say, there's no sewing, and it actually looks really good as well. Like, it doesn't look like you've taken a shortcut there. It probably looks better than sewing on a thumb separately sometimes actually. So yeah, that's a really good technique, and I think I've seen this in other people's patterns as well, so it wasn't necessarily something completely new to me that I've learned, but I think, you know, I'd kind of forgotten that I'd seen that before, so it was quite nice to sort of refresh my memory and see that technique used again. So that about wraps up my review. I mean, if I had to give this a book a rating, I probably would just give it 10 out of 10 because it's really up my street, just the look of all of the patterns in here, and I just love amigurumi patterns as well in general, and these are so well done. I just can't really fault it, to be honest, and it's a good price for what you're getting. So yeah, definitely 10 out of 10, would 100% recommend this to pretty much anyone that likes crocheting animals and stuffed toys. Yeah, it's definitely got to be one for your collection. So then that moves us on to what I'm going to be talking about in future videos, because I do have a few ideas, so I thought I might as well just mention them here. So firstly, I've actually pre-ordered a book called Pokemon Crochet. I think it's by Sabrina Summers, and I think it's coming on Tuesday actually. I just randomly saw it on Amazon actually while I was looking up this book, and I was looking up information about this book that I'm reviewing in this video, and I thought, you know what, that would actually be quite a nice one to review as well, especially considering that it's not even out yet. So yeah, I'll try and do a few patterns from there. I think when I looked at the synopsis, there's some easy level patterns, some intermediate ones, and some advanced, so I was thinking of maybe doing one from each level of difficulty and then talking you through how I found the book and whether I'd recommend it. So that's an idea for the future. And then also, this isn't part of the Tor Tries series, but I do have a couple of original patterns that I'm working on at the moment that I plan to release as YouTube videos, so those will be coming maybe in the next couple of months. I'm not sure how long it will take me to finish those, but yeah, that's something to look out for too if you actually want some more tutorials from me. Those are coming. And then lastly, I've also had the idea, so on my blog you'll see that I've got a lot of old patterns on there, so maybe from 2018 onwards, a lot of old free patterns that I did, and I had the idea of maybe going back and picking some of my favourites and doing some YouTube videos, actually like doing a proper tutorial on it, because at the moment they're just word patterns with no pictures at all, not even just pictures, there's nothing, it's just the standard word patterns. So yeah, I might do a video on that as well, so keep your eye out for that too. And that's pretty much all the ideas that I have for future videos, so yeah, keep your eyes peeled if any of that sounds interesting to you. And thank you so much for listening to this video. I hope you managed to get your hands on a copy of this book, because I think you'll really enjoy it. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye!